Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the session on infrastructure, network management and multimodality. It's the first that I am attending myself here in this R&I Days, and I'm very happy to join. I'm Harold Ruiters. I'm Director in DG Move, responsible for investments for sustainable and innovative transport. And we are, of course, working very closely together with our colleagues in DG RTD and are fighting for the same. And I really compliment DG RTD for the organization of these R&I Days. I note that my former director, Jean-Ric Paquet, has taken this good tradition from DG Move, and I know that colleagues in DG RTD are a little bit suffering from that, given the magnitude of this event and also the, let's say, the huge attention given. And that's right. Up front of introducing this session, I would like to really underline the need of innovation and research in Europe. And we are fully aligned from many DGs because we are starting a new era in that. And that should be really realized across the board. And this event, the R&I Days, are as such also an innovation and a real way to have this participatory approach that everybody can come in the definition of what is going to be Horizon Europe. And that will not be easy because you know that the linking of this program to the MFF discussion on how much money will be available will be a key issue. We cannot underestimate the need for research also in all of the policy fields. In our own policy field, it is very, very clear that research will be needed if we want to go for a Green Deal like Ursula von der Leyen has been putting forward. We still need research on a number of key areas. And whether it's also digitalization and fit for the digital age, like one of our other 6 priorities, again, we will have to work a lot also in the research arena, and thereby this very strong cohesion between DG RTD and the other DGs, between the policies of research and innovation, and such as energy, transport, digital, and so forth. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this session. We have been very, very much already into transport throughout this conference. You have seen a number of other sessions and events on that, focusing on vehicles, on alternative fuels, and on connected and automated mobility. Complementing now those things that have been discussed in other sessions, in this one we want to address the network-wide system view of mobility and transport. And in particular, we want to emphasize the importance for research and innovation in infrastructure, in network and traffic management, as well as in multimodal mobility for both passengers and transport freight. Clearly, these are related, but let me go into each of them. First of all, into infrastructure. We can all appreciate, of course, that infrastructure should be maintained, upgraded, and expanded. And this will not only contribute to safe mobility, but also to decarbonization and digitalization of transport. So new solutions can be developed certainly towards green infrastructures. And by green infrastructures, I also mean new designs, sustainable materials, and of course also with developing the rollout of recharging, refueling, and alternative fuel infrastructure. But we also need smart infrastructure, for instance, with sensor technologies to monitor the performance of the infrastructure and analyze data from vehicle movements. Just need to think, for instance, about Morandi Bridge and what could have been done there, as well as to enable connected and automated mobility, whether it's vehicle to infrastructure or also infrastructure to vehicle, or even infrastructure to infrastructure between the different modes. Well, still getting here, I was also thinking, like getting out of a metro, why is there no information, for instance, for the bus drivers that are up the ground, that there is just perhaps this train or metro passing by and that they wait this additional minute? Very often, this is not a problem in cities where the intensities are high. But if you come into, let's say, suburban areas where there might be on certain times of the day just 1 bus per hour, it would be quite crucial for elderly and for other people that this bus got this information, that this train has just passed and that he can wait a minute there. So there's so many things that can be done over there. At the same time, work is required to ensure the integration of physical and secure digital infrastructure, addressing also cybersecurity. Because, of course, the aim is to have a next-generation, efficient and innovative infrastructure that is modern, safe, secure, resilient, and facilitates traffic throughput and minimize environmental emissions. On this basis, we have jointly prepared as Commission and EU member states with experts and stakeholders a long-term EU strategic transport, research and innovation agenda, in short, STRIA. And that was presented for the first time in our Mobility Package 1 in 2017. We are now updating that roadmap, and it is of course also used for the design of Horizon Europe strategic plan, currently in discussion. We will hear more on this STRIA roadmap and the key areas proposed for infrastructure research and innovation from the speaker that will follow me, Mrs. Elena de la Peña, who will be telling you all about this STRIA infrastructure roadmap and who is an expert and the rapporteur for it. Let me now turn to the second area of this session, which is the network and traffic management, which is another key area for research and innovation. In particular, Europe needs to develop and deploy an advanced multimodal network and traffic management capability. This will help overcome system-wide capacity constraints. You know that we really have an issue there, and I fear it is undervalued as one of the key problems that Europe will have in the transport sector. Knowing that we will still have 35% more freight and for passengers and 53% more for freight, we can expect huge bottlenecks that can lead to huge costs. Already today, congestion has a cost of about 2% to GDP, calculated by the Delft University. So here again, we have developed a STRIA roadmap for network and traffic management, providing input to the proposal on the Horizon Europe strategic plan. Research and innovation in this area can be summarized along three main axes: design of multimodal network and traffic management, optimization of the demand capacity, and execution of demonstration projects. Let me emphasize here that research and innovation in multimodal network and traffic management is complementary to the work at modal level. So we need optimization and efficiency within each mode of transport, but also for the entire multimodal network as a whole. And yet, this may require certain performance trade-offs. But we'll come back to that later on with the second speaker, Johanna Zanidaki, who is an expert in this area, and also she is the rapporteur for the STRIA network traffic management roadmap. And then the final subject of this afternoon, this session here, is multimodality. This is an important area also for research and innovation, but it's also an important area for our policy. I think that I could say from DG Move side that we have not been so successful so far in really creating multimodality. We do, and we work for it, but it is not easy to get a seamless, integrated, multimodal door-to-door mobility for both passengers and freight. And indeed, much of research and innovation in transport is dedicated today to monomodal work. But we can still do more to develop cross-modal links. And we should, in fact, have a user-centric perspective that would look at how, if I wish to go from A to B, I can do that in the most efficient way, irrespective of this means the use of more than one transport mode. So, for instance, I use bus, train, and walking. And similarly for freight. We have discussed that many times, and I see good experts here in the room. What is the most efficient route to ship the goods? Combining the different logistic chains and also the concept of the physical internet. So I expect some questions on that, Sergio, later on. We can even see future research and innovation on combined routes of even perhaps combining vehicles and vehicles carrying and passengers and freight. We have not gone into that at all so far. We always look at it separately, freight and passengers. Additional work could, of course, also focus on e-ticketing, as much also as on multimodal cross-border mobility services, pushing the boundaries of mobility as a service, the so-called MaaS concept. And here again, as is the case for infrastructure and network management, we can leverage on the TEN-T corridors, on their urban nodes, and also on the comprehensive network, the broader network, as well as the related EU funding instruments, such as the Connecting Europe facility, to progress for multimodality. I know for sure that I will speak to the heart of Jean-Eric when I stress this element, because we really need also to combine the different funding instruments and to find the synergies between Horizon Europe, the Connecting Europe facility, the structural funds, and other programs that are available, because otherwise the scarcity of the EU budget and possibly also the very tough battle that there will be on that budget will not lead to sufficient results to get to a fully zero carbon society by 2050. So I hope that you will have an formative session with 3 excellent experts on these different areas that I've just mentioned. After them giving each of them about a 10-minute introduction in the subject, I would like to use the time for some exchange with you, with the room. There's this nice cube here which I will be throwing into you, and then you can use it for your intervention and hand it over to the next speaker there. And after that, I will briefly conclude this session of today on infrastructure, network management, and multimodality. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to introduce our first speaker of this afternoon, who is Mrs. De La Peña, who is an expert in infrastructure, who is also our rapporteur on this TRIA roadmap, and I pass the floor to her. Mrs. De La Peña, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to be here today to talk about infrastructure and how important research and innovation is in this field. And let me talk about a couple of important things before starting a very brief presentation. And the first one is why infrastructure? And well, it's because infrastructure is everywhere. Infrastructure is transversal. There is no mobility or there is no transport without infrastructure. We need high-quality transport infrastructure to face the challenges of the European Union, and these challenges are the challenge of the Horizon Europe program also. Infrastructure also is key for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations defined in 2015, and that are now inspiring policies and programs. And let me share with you one of the initial paragraphs of the white paper published by the Commission in 2011, and I'm reading as not to miss any information. Infrastructure shapes mobility. No major change in transport will be possible without the support of an adequate network and more intelligence in using it. And that's why we are here. And the second one is why am I here? I'm representing the Spanish Road Association. It's a non-profit organization created 70 years ago to promote more sustainable roads. We are also connected with the European Union Road Federation and the Smart Transportation Alliance. And I'm also participating in the roadmap of transport infrastructure in the framework of STRIA, which has been updated during 2019. And well, what about the challenges? Well, transport infrastructure investment, as you know, have a very positive impact in the economic growth. They create wealth and jobs. They enhance the trade. They provide mobility. They provide accessibility. There is definitely a very positive impact, and all the transport infrastructure should be built and should be managed, trying to maximize the positive impact in the economic growth and trying to minimize the negative impacts in the society and in the environment. And then I will ask you to have a look at the challenges that the European Union has to face now and in the future, and they are included in the Horizon Europe Strategic Plan orientations, and they are as follows. You can find it in the slide. Climate change and environmental collapse, future prosperity and sustainable growth, and European security and the well-being of our citizens. And well, if we analyze the challenges that the transport infrastructure has now, they are very connected with them. We know that the impact of infrastructures in the environment is big in terms of emission, energy consumption, biodiversity. There are a lot of items that are related to the impact in the environment. And again, their role in the economic growth of the region is also evident, and of course, infrastructure are connected with the living conditions of our citizens. And what about the challenges, and what about the priorities for research and innovation? With that, priorities are very related to the challenges that I have mentioned before. And well, within the Horizon Europe Strategic Plan orientations already show some potential research priorities that I think are very interesting. And well, you can find there like a cloud of words that involves all of them. And I would like to read also, again, not to miss any information. These are the challenges that are included in that document from Horizon Europe. New methods of transport maintenance and upgrade, improving safety, climate resilience, and environmental impact. New solutions to accommodate connected mobility. Infrastructure will accommodate new and evolving transport modes. Integration of physical and secure digital infrastructure, including cybersecurity, which is a key topic. Tools for information and data collection and management to monitor the performance of the infrastructure. Test governance, regulatory and public procurement models, and new contractual performance indicators and incentives to maintain and upgrade the infrastructure. Well, the development of the STRIA roadmap on transport infrastructure has considered these challenges. We are, of course, aligned with these challenges. And I'm not going to list all the actions that have been included in the roadmap, because there are a lot of actions, and the roadmap will be published soon, so you will have the opportunity to read it carefully. But, well, I would like to share some information with you. We have defined 8 thematic areas, 34 topics, and a total number of 100 actions. So we were very bad at summarizing our actions because we got 100, but at the beginning we had even more than 100. But there are a lot of things that are interesting, and you are probably more concerned of that than me. And, well, I will not list the 100 actions, but I would like to share with you the main thematic areas, the 8 thematic areas we have defined. You can see there. Governance. We think a lot of strategic decisions are taken at the governance stage. So we need innovation in that field, although sometimes it's difficult to plan some actions on innovation in that specific topic, but it's important. All the things related to legal framework, to procurement, and to coordination between governments and infrastructure has a lot of things to say in this area. Life cycle and asset management, money in the terms of financing, pricing and taxation, technology and digitalization, multimodality, interoperability and interconnectivity, safety and security, sustainability, environment and resilience, and logistics. And, well, all of them, most of them are connected and are related to other areas like the ones we will listen later, like network management and logistics. And let me also share some highlights that I think are important to have in mind. And is that we need research and innovation, but we also need deployment. I think we all are now aware of this. We need to translate the result of research and innovation to a real deployment to our transport infrastructure. We need to consider the trans-European networks and the main corridors, but we should not forget the other networks that are also important. Although we are in a European environment, but the other networks also have a very important role to play. And infrastructure should be considered from a wide approach, from a holistic approach, and in connections with other fields that are also developing very interesting roadmaps in this year, like smart mobility, electrification, alternative fuels, digitalization, connected vehicles, and so on and so forth. And again, we should think not only the traditional infrastructures like roads, railway, ports, inland ports, airports, which are, of course, very important for our daily life, but we should also think about more extended infrastructure that allow the deployment of electric vehicles because they have the infrastructure for the charging of vehicles, infrastructures that allow the digitalization and all the technology to make that real. Well, and if I have to define 3 priorities of all of them, I remember that I mentioned that we have 100, and I was lying to you because really there were 101, but I prefer the global number of 100. But if I had to define 3, I think I would choose the 3 that you can see there. The carbonization of transport infrastructure during its entire life cycle and all the environmental topics that are around this big concept. Digital infrastructure for connected and automated mobility, and improvement of safety and security. I come from the world of roads, so imagine how important for us is safety with the enormous amount of people that is killed in the world in roads every year or every day. And well, just to finish, I would like to share finally, as we should not forget that the European Union plays a leading role. It's not only about what we can do in the main corridors in the trans-European network, it's also a matter of how the procedures, the best practices, the ideas, the project, the innovation can be applied in other scales, national, regional, or local. The European Union inspires the world, and really, in research of innovation, I think this is true. The rest of the world is looking looking at the European Union in this field. And I would like to congratulate finally the European Commission and DG Move for including this session of transport infrastructure, network management, and logistics in these European Research and Innovation Days. Because, well, sometimes infrastructure and associated matters are not so considered in research. And I think it has been an excellent idea, so thank you for having this sensitiveness to that specific topic. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your explanations on the field of infrastructure. I, without further ado, would give now the floor to Johanna Tsanaraki to talk about the second subject, network management. And floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon from me too. I couldn't agree more with the previous speaker, and I'm sure I couldn't agree more with the next speaker as well. It is, because we discussed it before, it is really, really a good, how do you call it? It's a good combination to talk in one session about the infrastructure, the network management, and multimodality, because it's all interrelated, and we should all see the entire network and the entire system that encompasses both the topics before and after my intervention. I'm going to tell you that innovation is not only about technology. It's also about how you put parts together and how you manage them, how you put the governance for that innovation to take place and how to move forward. And I'm also going to warn you about something which I'm sure you know, that's why you're here. We are going towards a system, towards a network, and we are not ready yet. And this is what we should be researching and looking at. So my point is, we're not only talking about road traffic management, we're talking about the network traffic management. So I'm going to go to the next slide. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about the ERTICO vision. I represent ERTICO. ERTICO is the ITS, Intelligent Transport System stakeholders. We went through an exercise back in 2018. It's still valid. What is the vision of our 121 members for 2030? And we saw these buzzwords: connected, automated, digital, multimodal. You know them all. Electric, cross-border, on-demand, user-centric, and shared. And we have this fantastic picture which looks a bit chaotic, and it shouldn't, where you see the drones, you see the APIs on the mobility as a service services, or you see the buses, the V2I, the V2X, the V2V, and all that. And it's obvious that we are talking about new mobility services that are disrupting the entire idea all the time, from drones to micromobility, big data, IoT, and so on. And that was the result of our exercise. On the other hand, I was also honored to be one of the experts that were working on the STRIA roadmap back in the day. In 2016, we worked on it. 2017, it was published. We had the same understanding. Of course, we were talking about 2050, which is, at the time, it sounded a bit science fiction, but what is important and what we immediately understood was that we have to have a vision and understanding of what is the goal, where are we going, and then count the steps backwards and see how we can attain this. And we looked. Again, we recognize the connected automated vehicles, the e-mobility, all this micromobility and so on, and the shared aspect, user-centric. But what is important is that we should have a pathway that is aligned. We should take actions that are aligned because we are talking about a system, a network of mobility that encompasses everything: passengers, freight, micromobility, electromobility, everything. We shouldn't focus only on one part, which may be electromobility for some of you, or connected and automated driving. We should see the system and how this is facilitating the pathway or the roadmap, including mobility, multimodality, multimodal services, and the infrastructure, not excluding them. It's not an easy slide to explain. I'm not going to do that to you today. You can go for the STRIA report and see it, but it's really interesting to see how these different lines are progressing. To repeat what the chairman already talked about, we saw the three main priorities. First priority in R&I, how to design a resilient and adaptable multimodal system. The architecture of this is important. How do we go for the alignment of all these modes and levels of cooperation in a system, in a network? Do we go for a centralized authority or decision-making power or body, or do we go decentralized? Because don't forget, we're talking about different levels. We're talking about cities and regions. We're talking about modes that are not only road-based, but also water and air and so on. So this is where the research should be happening. Second priority is the optimization of demand capacity. We have supply, we have demand. We want to optimize the mobility network. What is the best? And not the best for one part, the public sector, for example, public authorities, but what is the best for all the stakeholders that are cooperating in this. Take into account, understand the needs and the requirements of the private sector, who need to sell and make profit and products and services, which is not necessarily a bad thing. What are the priorities of the public sector with geofencing, with environmental targets, and so on? Understand, see what is the common line, and don't forget the third win in this win-win-win story, the user. What does the user want? The user doesn't want to be blocked because this is entering from the road network into the water and so on. The user wants seamless mobility. That's what we are trying to do. And the more we progress towards automation, the more this cooperation is being imposed to us by the system. So we might as well start now understanding the needs and making this, whatever is coming imposed to us, making it work on everyone's win. Finally, execution. Demonstration and pilots. Not only staying in the testing and the pilots, but pilots and demonstration, so we see, does it work? Shall we go further? So with the sustainability aspect in mind. And of course, we have to have KPIs. In this understanding of needs and requirements, we need clear KPIs, we need clear guidance for all the stakeholders in this network of mobility network management. That's a more detailed slide. I talked about that, but what I didn't say, and what is, I think everyone knows already, is the special emphasis we have to put on data. This exchange of data, open data, accessible data. I'm not talking about free data. That's another discussion. Also, the changing roles of the public and the private sector, how one should understand the other, how it's not necessarily the public sector taking all decisions, but in cooperation with the private sector can outsource something or have more input coming in the decision making, and societal engagement and awareness. Societal engagement is wider than user acceptance. Societal engagement is integrating how the network should be used by the users and the providers, and understanding the opportunities and the responsibilities of everyone. Because when we are talking about optimizing the mobility network traffic, we are talking about understanding the needs of the society as a whole. So these are points that we should have special emphasis on, and I'll finish with that slide. It's the Internet of Mobility. It's what we are talking about in many fora, in many meetings. It's the ethical idea of mobility, where you have this connected modes, connected levels. You have the waterborne, you have rail, urban air mobility with the drones, but also aviation. You have all the technologies, IoT, big data, and so on, everything working together in a synergy, in an alignment. And I'm not talking about harmonization. I'm talking about alignment. And that will make our life as users easier. So thank you very much. I hope I help the discussion that's going to take place later. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Johanna, for your contribution on network management. And I pass the floor now to Jos Arts, who will be doing the speech that you already agreed with up front on multimodality. Jos.
We have to see that. Okay. Thank you for being here. I was thinking about, I'm agreeing with everything what has been said, what is in the STRIAS, what is in Horizon Europe, but what could get a bit more attention? So smart technology, gadgets, lots of things there, and we trust in that. But I think if we're not careful, we forget about the common ground we have together, and how to deal with that. Common sense for the common. So that's what I want to stress to you. Now it should go on. The right button helps. So huge challenges, we discussed that earlier. Climate change, energy transition, alternative fuels was said, environmental pollution, still a big thing. In the Netherlands we know that now. Aging infrastructures, that's not mentioned that much, but I think a very important thing. In North Rhine-Westphalia people know that. New mobility technologies, of course, has been discussed. Global competition, the Silk Road is lots discussed. What do we do on par? Livability, in the end, that's it. It's not only the end users, it's also the passive users who are smoking the fumes of our mobility. And justice, is it only about cities or also by all other parts? And perhaps we are allowed to have some open space left in the end. So be careful to build new types of infrastructure. Perhaps we should use better existing infrastructures and have their performance improved. So multimodality. I think it should be a bit more than multimodality. Of course, cars, trucks on the road, and of course, walkability, bikeability. That's very important. And then we have the other modalities, you know that. And then if we are thinking in that, then we are thinking TEN-T corridors, local corridors, national corridors. That's what we're doing, and then we are linking them. That's very good for multimodality, making these links. If you want to do that, then it's very important that they are planned in bundles and not per se straight on to each other. And then we have to think about hubs, terminals, ports. That's actually the idea of nodes, urban nodes, and that's not the only 88 we have. Actually, we should think about much more than the 88 nodes. I think small and medium cities are very interesting, also for R&I, because innovation is much easier in small cities because the people know each other and they can find each other. Now, other modalities not discussed yet, but I think energy and perhaps new types of infrastructures or bloody pipelines, we should think about that also more. Innovation, really good that we put that in the equation. And I should have said NTM, sorry, that's my fault. But the network and traffic management, yes, that's all very good. But I think there is an important thing missing here. And that's the space where this all is happening. That's the land uses, housing, offices, industry, and also perhaps a bit of water because of climate change, and we need also some nature perhaps. And then we see urbanization, so this becomes a mess. Who is taking care of the traffic space, the freight and the persons traffic who are competing, and what are we doing with the local and long distance traffic on the networks, the road networks, the railroad networks near cities, the peri-urban areas? So this is the big thing. Multimodality, infrastructure, T&M, NTM, smart, it's really good, but we have not enough. They meet each other all in that space. Who is taking care of that space? That's not our silo as transportation. Perhaps it is. We should have a sense for the common. So I think we need planning and management beyond silos, otherwise we are in this strategy of the commons and how to enlarge this idea. So I think we have really good starts, but we should also focus on this. That is actually thinking about the same common space, and that's about orgware also, not only hardware and software. And then we need to think about the multidimensional elements here. It is really, truly multidimensional, the issues we are dealing with. And if we're doing research and innovation, we should reach out with that. It's not only the classic modes, it's also the active modes, smart city planning. Then we can do already lots of mobility in a healthy way. Even obesity can be dealt with. Freight logistics, but also persons and end users. How do we deal with that? Sectors are the different sectors. And multi-scalar, it's the local level, but it is also the functional urban area where the economic interests are for the companies who are transporting and doing the logistics. And in the end, it is also the whole corridor level. And then if you look, for instance, at the region of Rotterdam, you have to think about, okay, I can make a new TEN-T corridor, improve that, but perhaps I can do also things at the local level because more than 30% of the traffic is only less than 5-7 kilometers. That could also be done by bikes, perhaps. And even the last mile can be done by the people from the station, walking to their home or going by bike to their home. So logistics and persons traffic are to be combined in a very simple, sensible way. Not that complex techniques are needed then. Multi-funding is important, etc., etc. In the end, research and development should be much more multidisciplinary and focused on practice as discussed earlier. So I think what we need in research and development, but also in practice, is boundary spanners, people who are crossing the boundaries or are out of their silos. And that's not how we are trained. That's not how we are raised in our lobby groups, platforms. So how to deal with that, with the in-between space? Because if you stand in that in-between space, you can feel very alone in that common ground. So how to go beyond the bystander effect, the common ground is deteriorating. So future avenues, that's my last slide, Harald, so you are not too nervous. I think, first of all, of course, multimodality, the interfaces. Interfaces with freight and logistics and persons transport, yes. And transit-oriented development and logistic-oriented development can be combined and are already combined in good practice cases. We can do that. And actually in a city like Groningen, where I'm living, we are now having Dutch-funded research to do that. And we are working with private parties, the public parties, as well as people, public-private people, civic society. Interface between corridors, nodes, and networks. How is that working? What about the peri-urban regions? What about the in-between spaces? The empty space between big cities? No, people are living there. How to deal with that? And completely different multimodal discussions if you are going intra a city or between cities. We need to have eye for that carefully. Very important, for instance, in Europe, we have not that many enormous big cities, world globally seen. But for instance, this region, the ABC region, Alonso already in the 1960s saw this is a very powerful region. How can it be? It's all small cities, but they are very livable and they use each other's qualities because they are so well connected, and that needs to be done and maintained very carefully. That's actually for transportation a very important point. So think about this borrowed size, as they call it. That was actually the next one. And what are functional urban areas? We talk about them, but actually we have hardly the data. We need more research in that. What are the qualities of the different urban regions and more in general the regions? We need spatial economic analysis for that. Valuation, cost-benefit analysis, very weak in the soft side. And the spatial quality, environmental quality, very difficult to put it in the equation. So what's the business case for policymakers? Very difficult, so we need research into that, not only in new techniques. And distribution of impacts, they are not even distributed, and more contested knowledge will make that we need to deal with that. So justice, transport justice, environmental justice are things to look in, also in research and innovation. That's very important to transportation, this more critical way. Monitoring and data, already mentioned, that's the few where we can work on in our governance. Okay, multifunctional designs, we can do it very locally, but how to do it on a higher scale of the region? And the interfaces between technical innovations and spatial development, we hardly know what the spatial impacts are actually of all these innovations. And then, yeah, you need to work together, cooperating governance, to focus on this common space, you could say. Here is I think the interface between the different parties very important. It's not only governments, but if you really want to address network issues, network governance issues, you have to cooperate. How to do that? That's not an easy thing. What are good practices? We need research in that. And that's about public-private people partnerships, you could say. And what is the role of individuals here, boundary spanners? How to co-create and co-fund, because money makes the world goes around in the end. And then finally, yeah, if we do all this, then how do we make the knowledge cycle work? I think urban nodes where all these transportation modes are, where the logistics are the hubs, they are also platforms for innovation and research. And that's not only the usual suspects. I think the small and medium cities are very interesting for research innovation to look at, because people can find each other. They know not only the hardware, the software, but also they can find each other to collaborate the orgware. And I think if we would do that, then we can sense for the common, we can work on a common ground. So that's my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Jos, and happy that you also shed the light on your priorities. But perhaps before, we have 20 minutes for discussion, ladies and gentlemen, and we are going to use the microphones from your side and the box for the room. But before I turn to the room, Elena, could you repeat, you had 3 very clear priorities that you would like to see addressed. Can you repeat them one more time?
Yes, can you hear me? Yeah. Well, if I had to choose one, it's very difficult. I would like to choose like 20 or 30, but if I had to choose 3, probably decarbonization of the transport infrastructure during the entire life cycle,
Yes.
the digital infrastructure for connected and automated mobility, and safety and security. That I don't know why I decided to put it in the 3rd place, because probably it should be the first one.
Thank you for repeating them, and I think they very much coincide also with priorities of the Commission. The last one, of course, safe and secure, is so high in European transport, and I think citizens expect that transport is safe and secure, and we should continue to work on that. There's no doubt about it. The other 2 are very much, I think, into the focus of what our President-elect has put forward: Green Deal, very clearly, digital age. So I think that there are 3 very clear, I would say, focuses that you put forward. Can I ask the same from Johanna and from Jos? If you have, the money is limited. I'm looking to some RTD colleagues, and it will not be so easy. I'm looking also at Dirk Beckers, who will manage these projects afterwards. He prefers a few good ones. So can you say what you would like to see as 3 priorities?
We have identified 3. The first one is the design of the system, of the network, of the architecture, how to manage the network. This is one. The second one is optimization of the capacity based on the understanding and the alignment of the demand and the supply. And the third one is pilots, testing and execution, not only the one-off pilots. So these are the 3.
Very good. Thank you for that. These pilots indeed are absolutely necessary, because also from research, even if in the 2nd pillar we are already very close to policy research, it is needed to afterwards also deploy. And yesterday I was in a meeting with Pascal Lamy, and he said, I mean, it's quite nice to think that as soon as you legislate, because that's the other thing that we can do here from the union side, to propose and legislate, as soon as you legislate and you put forward, for instance, a standard, like you say, a CO2 standard for trucks, and you know that you have no alternative yet for long-distance trucks to get to those percentages, then you can do researches, and the researchers will find, because there is this link, there is this obligation to find. So I quite like the setup of the new Horizon Europe, because we have a link between fundamental research, which we'll still continue to need, but also applied research and even the accelerator. But thank you for putting that forward. And of course, the ones that you have put forward, I think, are very close to us. I mentioned myself, congestion will be a real issue. And we are not, I mean, citizens and also business, and with our model that we have in the society, we are not going to curb it drastically lower. So we need to do that, yeah. Jos, from your side.
Yeah, the 3 are, first of all, the interfaces within modality and with other elements in multimodality. I think that's very important, and mass and synchro modality are part of that, of course. But adding to that is putting it in context. That's the spatial economic side. What is the value which is created and which is not created? I think that's very important. Second one, and to have really knowledge about that, that's really lacking actually to make it work that way. And finally, I think the orgware, the multi-level governance, we need to focus on that also. Otherwise, all this research and innovation, how to get it into deployment, into working, I think that's really an important thing. And that's not done just by the transport sector.
Thank you also for those points, and I cannot agree more. I mean, if I see what we are doing in our corridors, this multi-level governance is really critical, because one of the aspects you highlighted as well, which is I would say, underestimated, is this spatial planning and how we organize things, which in the end will have a huge impact on the subjects that we are discussing here. And I think this is one of the reasons why we haven't been successful so much in being multimodal. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I have here this box. I'm going to throw it around to those who want to speak. I want to ask you, or Rafa, you will take that? Yeah. I want to ask you, when you want to speak, stand up, tell who you are, and raise your question really clearly, 2 or 3 distinguished panelists, so that they can answer. Who would like to start? Who would like to add a few priorities to Mrs. von der Leyen and to the Research Commissioner to come?
David Talbot, Transport.
Close to your mouth, please.
David Talbot, Transport for London. Can't disagree with any of those research priorities and your point about congestion. But there was one thing that did get mentioned in the panel, but then seemed to get forgotten in those priorities, and that was the active travel modes. The way we're going to address congestion in cities is get less vehicles on the road, get people walking and cycling. I really think we need some focus around that area.
Thank you. Jos?
Actually, that's why I stress this spatial planning side, because we are mobile because we need to go to work, to the hospital, to education, etc. And that's a very complex day pattern. And therefore, Hegestrand already in the 70s said, this is complex, and then the car is often the solution. Unless you live in a small, medium-sized city where you can walk the whole thing, and that city is very well connected with other cities, so as a whole they are also globally competitive. And actually Europe has this type of cities, so I think we should employ that better, and spatial planning is one of the big things to make this work. And it can happen. 60% of the trips in Groningen city, only 230,000, is by bike, so it's possible. 60% by bike. In America, it's 0.5 on average.
There must be fit people in Groningen over there. 60% of all moves made in bike. Who next, please? There's a gentleman over here, Rafael. Up, there you go.
Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Peters from the Flemish government. Maybe Groningen is flat, so it's easier to... yeah. Anyway, 2 questions also for Jos. You've mentioned in one of the slides aging infrastructure. How is Europe or Horizon Europe going to assist my government to keep it in mind, to update their structure or renew them in a cost-effective way in the next, I don't know how many years?
First of all, every country has its own investment funds, and if you're in Flanders, you're relatively rich, so most likely corridor coordinator of TEN-T will say, you get a bit, not that much, at least to the Netherlands they say. But of course we have TEN-T money, CEF money, etc. But I think research and innovation is really important, because we can just replace the old bulb with a new bulb, but we should do smarter, of course, LED in light. And if we replace the bridge, why not put also a biking path next to it? Very easily done. Is there actually a new lock needed, or can it be done differently? Is renewable energy possible to produce there? The whole situation is different than 70 or 100 years ago. So that's actually an enormous opportunity for infra providers to be strategic and their asset management and network governance. They can be strategic, but they have to learn that, to exchange that, and how to do that, how to program that, and how to collaborate in a complete different way than I have a project, are you willing to cooperate with me? No, we have together a problem, and how can we define that problem? That's a complete different way. So research and innovation is needed there. And then you need these boundary spanners, these people who can do that. That's not the classic person who's dealing with renewal and maintenance.
Johanna?
If I may continue, are you going to foresee budget or assistance to get those infrastructure people thinking in a different way? Because
I'm doing a plea for it.
So we have the infrastructure representative here, and it's funny because Jos and I are taking the microphone and we are taking the voice from the infrastructure, which is completely wrong. So I'll pass the microphone and then I'll add.
Well, I think probably during the last year we have been thinking like separated silos, infrastructure, mobility, innovation, network management, multimodality, and I think that we are now all convinced that we need to change the paradigm. We should think about mobility. Probably mobility is the word that's can put everybody working in the same philosophy. So definitely we need to change a lot of things. We need to change institution, and we need to change how people is working, and we need to, well, I think we are probably in a revolution that has started a few years ago and that will last during the following years and will probably support the mobility that we want to the future. If we don't change everything, I think it's very difficult that we can really make a transversal change for the mobility system.
So there is a willingness to change, and we are talking about this cooperation, this understanding of the needs. And part of that is to understand that the infrastructure cannot change that fast because there are legacy systems, there are investments made, and there should be how do you call it? When you're spending, when you're investing a lot of money, and then you should have a return to cover the costs. This is part of the understanding that all stakeholders should have. It's also the case with the legacy, not the legacy infrastructure, the legacy also vehicles within the traffic, within the mobility network itself. So when we reach this understanding, we can all help each other go forward. And this is part of the societal engagement that I was talking about. It's this understanding of the needs of the stakeholders and how to make sure that we all cooperate to go towards the new thing that is coming.
Let me give you from my side also an example. I'm working quite a bit on Brenner. Some people in this room know that Brenner Base Tunnel were one of our big missing links on the Trans-European network. Now on that corridor we have a very, very aging highway. I've been talking to these people, and this highway, which between, in fact, somewhere between Innsbruck and all the way down to Bolzano, is built for large parts on a fantastic amount of bridges that are kind of floating across the valley. These are going to have to be replaced within 10 years from now. That will be a huge challenge in all of the aspects of each of your domains. First of all, how are we ever going to do that? Because we have a very, very densely used infrastructure over there. And can we do it in such a way that it will be a smart infrastructure, as Jos was saying afterwards? How can I cope with the congestion that is going to cause? And how can I find with research, because I'm looking at the research quality, because often it's not understood that this is also a research question, this maintenance and this replacement. How can we address this in time? So as let's say, as a corridor manager with our input from projects that we co-fund highly, how can we be sure that when we do this, that we also have a solution long-term between these different traffic modes, between road, rail, and the others, and that we have a solution in time? In 10 years from now, then addressing the problem like we have seen in some other places on the network will not be sufficient. So I need research to address that. What can we do? This is quite a crucial thing. This is not to be underestimated. We're talking about billions of investment there. Question. I already predicted that Sergio would ask a question.
You call for one. Sergio Barberino from Procter & Gamble and Alice, the Logistic Innovation Platform. So on physical internet, I wanted to say one good thing. The key of physical internet that is super-connected logistic, very efficient, is modularization. And the work done by the Commission in the past years, to be honest, I have very little to say against. I mean, the revision of the Weight and Dimension Directive, the fact that you blocked some stupid stuff on the Combined Transport Directive, I mean, and stuff is happening. I mean, you see more intermodal services coming up, and probably it's going to go exponential. So I think the next focus is the city. And in the city, one of the big problems is that delivery services are increasing, and there are a lot of actors there pushing for half an hour delivery. I don't think that's the priority, but we should look at safety. I mean, it's not safe to deliver into cities. And Transport for London has been pioneering congestion charging, but it's not normal that actors that have retail shops in London, they need to pay millions of pounds of fines every year just to deliver to their shops. So we need to rethink the city infrastructure in such a way that A, it's legal to deliver, and it doesn't block everybody else, and that is correctly charged. And I think that's really the challenge we have. And then we, industry, we own the modularization bit. I don't think you should impose it by standard. We need to do that piece.
That's a nice one. Any of you?
Yeah, well, certainly this is a problem because sometimes we are like obsessed about the protection of the environment, and then we implement, like in London, charging system that are also being implemented in some other cities, for example, in Madrid. But we should not forget that the economic life should go on. And if not, we are not going to be able to live in our cities. So I think it's, of course, I think we should think about this, about the planning of the cities now, and we need to rethink everything. And the cities we have now, we can change them. We can take the lessons learned for the areas that we are building for the future. And in the meantime, we should develop innovative solutions not to stop the lives in the city, because a high percentage of people is living there, and it's planned to be more and more in the future. So let's make our cities livable, but also alive.
I think a very important point. In many cities, hospitals, education are enormous attractors of logistics and persons traffic. In some cities now, they are making specific logistic terminals outside the city center, and all the trucks are going there and the trains, and then only by electric vehicles going to the hospital and big educational parts in the morning early on. So it's also about organizing this together. And for instance, then you need a platform in a city where end users meet the logistic operators, the municipality, province, etc. And then you can really do nice things. And for instance, I have to say it again, Groningen. I'm not plugging the city, but we had a SUM conference there in June. Actually, there is a platform, Accessible Groningen, and that managed even to change the education times. So all the students are coming now at different times than the workers are coming, the employees, and that really helps. And that hospital is, for instance, more than 10,000 people work there. That is doing its logistics different. So I think it's also about how organizing this together, not as individual operators.
Very interesting. I still have time for one or two questions, very quick. Can you pass the box? Yeah.
Sebastian Töns from the Technical
Close.
Sebastian Töns from the Technical University of Denmark. I was wondering how are the interaction with the global tech players are foreseen with Google and Tesla, for instance. So they are developing projects talking about, and they have data, and also talking about sustainability and also value, cost benefits. So how do you foresee this interaction?
Is there still another question that we can take one or two questions at the same time? No? Then I don't know who would like to answer on this question.
I don't know what to say, because I don't see them in the discussions that we are having in the Brussels scene. And there are some companies, these big companies, that they go their own way and they do things. And then it's us discussing, trying to align, trying to understand the needs of each other. So I don't want to accuse them, but they're not here. So, yeah.
Jos?
Yeah, it's true. There are new players, and they are very powerful. And for instance, in the Google, but also Alibaba, it started in Liège, enormous terminal for logistics. I'm not sure if you would be very happy if you live in Liège with that. What I see is that these big companies, they also use public space, public traffic space easily for their objectives. And so I think there's very much need for a strong power on the other side to really fiercely discuss this with these companies, not because they are the devils, no, they are not. They have enormous amount of data and power, but we should unite ourselves local level as well as European level to really being a good discussion partner, and to also make aware that in their business model sometimes it's not that sustainable for the local people. So I think Uber is possible because there's traffic space, but it is actually misusing taxpayers' money. And the taxi drivers, they have to need a permit. So I think there is really problematic elements in these big platforms international. So we need governance to deal with that, and not to say that they are only bad, but to have an adult discussion with them.
Thank you, Josh, for putting that forward in that sense. I feel exactly the same. I mean, they have, and it will happen. It will happen. There will be rules that they will have to comply with, like all of the others. If we are putting forward rules on CO2 for trucks, Amazon is not for nothing announcing that they are going to buy 100,000 electric trucks, because they know very well that also in the public perception they have to step up what they are doing. And I think that we have been a little bit perhaps taken by surprise by these platforms, but now time has come that we see what they are in fact causing us. And so we need to regulate on certain points, not to forbid them to do this, but how to incorporate. And a point you were making, Jos, also is this multimodality can also be in the same vein, like you were addressing, be addressed. Why shall we not have also this idea of these networks having those kind of platforms for logistics outside of cities that then can cater for the distribution in the right way through the cities? I'm always wondering also in this city here that these deliveries by big lorries into, for instance, Delhaize are happening at 8 o'clock in the morning, middle of the traffic jam. And why cannot this not be done by smaller trucks at more appropriate hours? And the fact that you could in Groningen change the opening hours of schools looks to me like a miracle. In this country, they are already at, I don't know, for a century at the same time. And we're all traffic jamming in the morning due to that. So there's a lot of things that we can do. And I think you have been a fantastic panel. The time was very short. I have to conclude here. So I would like to thank all the three of you, Jos, Elena and Johanna, with a big applause. And have nice RRIDs. Thank you.